All right. Good evening, everyone. So today we'll be doing a workshop on creating custom Gutenberg blocks. Okay. So I'll probably start with just showing you what is Gutenberg and how to use it, and then after that we will pick up a simple block, and then we'll try to build that block using JavaScript and other things that are available for creating Gutenberg blocks. Okay. So quick introduction about me. My name is Sudar Muthu, and I'm part of WP Chennai community. And I'm basically a WordPress developer, and I've been working on WordPress for quite some time now. And as I said, today we will see about Gutenberg. Okay, so I'm going to quickly share my screen and. Yeah, meanwhile, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. And after this workshop, once it is done, I'll try to answer all the questions. All right, you all should be able to see my screen. Is that correct? Okay, so what I have here is a very like a fresh WordPress install. So I just installed WordPress, and it's in my local. And first, initially, as I said, we'll just get started with showing what is Gutenberg, right, and how to use it. And then we will move on to seeing how we can create our own custom blocks. Okay, so I'm just going to create a new post. And this is running the latest version of WordPress, which is 5.5. So you would, by default, you will see the Gutenberg editor, right? So earlier, you'll have a TinyMCE editor, which is basically for, now I think it's called the classic editor, but this one will actually allow you to add blocks. So maybe we'll just add a title. And after that, if you can click here to add different blocks. You can also click this button here to add different blocks. So the blocks, each component that you can add to the page is called a block, right? And these blocks are actually grouped together. So these are like the text-based blocks, like the paragraph, heading, and things like that. And then we will have other blocks like media, and then like these are design blocks, widgets, and these are for embeds and other things like that. So we'll have, so these are all the built-in blocks that come as part of WordPress. And I have not installed any other plugin now. This is like a fresh WordPress install. Okay, so let's just try adding a heading, and we can choose whether it has to be H1, H2, and things like that. So let's have this, and then we can add a paragraph block. Blocks. So we can keep adding more. We can keep adding more blocks here, and as I said, we could add any number of blocks. Maybe we could add like a quote, the famous Superman dialogue, right? With great power comes great. And things like that. Okay, so now when we publish this and try to see this page in the front end, we will see all the content that we have created, right? So this is the heading, and this is the paragraph that we created, and this is the quote. So one major advantage of using Gutenberg is that you kind of get a true WYSIWYG editor. WYSIWYG mean what you see is what you get, right? So if you look at this part of this part, right? And if you, so this is the front end, and this is like the editorial interface. If you actually look at it, you can see that this looks exactly same, right? Even the background color of the theme and like everything else. Okay, that is like a major advantage of Gutenberg when compared with classic editor, because in classic editor there are only so much restrictions on how this page can be rendered. And the other advantage of blocks is you could move this down, move this up, you could drag, drop, do all those things. You can drag them to like any other place, move them, and insert them in other places and other things. Okay. um, Another quick thing that I wanted to show is like if you have a particular post with like a lot of blocks and you want to have you want to kind of get like an idea of how these blocks are looking, then you can also click this. So this will kind of give you an idea of the hierarchy of blocks, right? So he basically says now we have 4 blocks in total, 2 paragraph and 1 heading and 1 quote. So you can actually see how the block are outlined. Okay, so we have a title and then an H2 and things like that. Okay, and similarly, there is also another thing that you can try. There is something called code editor. So by default, we are using the visual editor, but you can also see the code editor, which kind of shows you how these blocks are internally stored in the DB or in WordPress, right? So this is how WordPress is actually going to be storing each of these blocks, right? For example, this is a heading block that we created. This is the quote block that we created. And these are the 2 paragraphs that we have. Okay. So this is to kind of give you an idea of like how Gutenberg actually works, right? So let me just again refresh this and we will see the change that we did. Okay. Now, what we are going to be doing is, as I said, like there are these different blocks that are there that are available. But what if we want to create our own custom blocks, right? There could be like a lot of reasons why you want to do it. One major reason why people generally create custom blocks is, let's say that you have some attributes in the theme or some elements in the theme which you want to encapsulate and probably kind of provide a rich editorial experience to the user. For example, maybe you want to have like a CTA section in your theme, or right? And whoever is the editor who is actually going to be editing that page, all they need to do is just look at fill those content, and as they're filling it up, they would actually be able to see how that particular block is actually going to be rendered in the front end as well, right? So that is one reason why we would want to create custom blocks. The other thing is like you don't have to be restricted with the amount of blocks here. You could create things like maybe you want a slider, or you want like an accordion things, or you want to display testimonials of your clients and things like that, right? So for those things you could also create a custom block, right? And now what we are going to do is basically see how we can create a custom block. And for us to create custom block, we need to use React, okay? Because what the entire block editor, which is there in WordPress, is actually created using React, okay? But it would be good if you know React, but I wouldn't say that you have to be an expert in React to actually create these blocks. Okay, the main thing that you would need is a good understanding of the ES6 syntax in JavaScript. I mean, you could still create blocks without using ES6, but if you use ES6, I think it would be much more easier to create blocks. Okay, now let's try to create a custom block. Now, what I'm going to do is there are multiple ways to create a custom block, but what I'm going to do is use one of the like official packages by WordPress for creating blocks. Okay, it's called WordPress/create block. This this particular package is available in npm, and this is actually released by WordPress itself. And this is very similar to the create React app npm package, which actually allows you to scaffold new React projects. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is basically you could install this through npm and then run the command, or you could use npx. What npx does is like it will download this package and run the command without actually installing it locally. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is basically go to my plugins directory. So it's pretty empty right now. So, and I'm going to be running this, and let's try creating a CTA block. CTA is basically called a call to action. Call to action is whenever you display a page and then you have a button or a link and you want people to act on it, right? So that's called a CTA, and we'll just create a CTA block. Okay. So now what this command is going to do is basically pull in all the npm dependencies and things like that. So it will just run and it will create a plugin. So while it is doing, let's yeah, so it's just creating all these files. Let's quickly see what are the files that are getting created. So you can see that, so this is the plugin that got created. This is the main file in the plugin. So it has the plugin header and things like that. And it has one function which is called in init. Okay. And what this function does, if we look into it, it basically creates some assets. It is creating an PHP file, it's creating a JS file and a CSS file and a couple of CSS files, and then including them. The important thing that we have to look at here is the register block type function. Okay, so what this function does is basically it creates a new block or registers a new block in WordPress. And this is very similar to the register post type function that we have, which allows you to register a new post type, right? And then similarly, you have register taxonomy function to register a custom taxonomy. Similarly, we have register block type. So this is the function that is actually going to register a new block. Okay. And when we register, the first thing is like the name of the block. Here, the name of the block that we're going to use is Cta Block. The first one is the namespace. Namespace is like if you if you have a plugin and then you create a lot of blocks in that plugin, you could preface all those blocks with a name, and that's called namespace. In this case, we're just going to call it as create block because we just use that utility to create it, right? So, and then inside that register block function, we are also going to be passing an array, and that has three parameters. Okay, one is the editor script, editor style, and then the normal style. What these three things are going to be doing is basically we are actually going to be passing the name of the JavaScript file that would be executed in the editor whenever this block is getting used. And editor style is a CSS file that is going to be used whenever this particular block is used in the editor. And the style class or the style attribute refers to the CSS file that will be loaded in the front end. Okay. You can see that for all these three, we're just passing a name. And if we look above, you can see that all these scripts and these JS and CSS files are actually getting registered here, right? So the first one, the editor script, is actually getting registered here. This is basically, it is referring to the index.js file inside build directory. And for the CSS, it is referring to the index.css file inside the build directory. And for the front-end style, it is actually referring to the style-index.css file. Okay. So these are files that the command created for us. If we look inside this source directory, we can see there is a style.scss file and then the editor.scss. Okay, and all these things are actually going to be built and kept inside the build directory. So right now you can see that there is no build directory. We will see if the command is executed. Yeah, so the command has executed and it has scaffolded the plugin. Now what we need to do is basically run npm install to make sure that everything gets installed. So we will go inside the block and then run npm install. So before I run npm install, I want to show you the package.json file. So this file is there. It has a dev dependency and couple of scripts that we can write. Okay, so let me run npm install. What npm install is going to do is basically install all the dependencies that are needed for this plugin to work. Okay, and those dependencies would be stored in the node modules directory. Okay. Okay, looks like somebody is trying to. Okay, so npm install has finished, and next what we need to do is basically run the npm build command. Okay, so what npm build command will do is basically take all the css files inside, like the css and javascript files, and then we'll create the build directory. Okay, so this will basically create the index.js, index.css, and like all these asset files. Okay, and we also have another command called npm start. When we do this, what it will do is automatically wait for, like whenever we change any of these JS or CSS files, it will automatically do the building. Okay. Um, okay. So next, we will see how this thing appears in the front end, right? So this is our block. So this is in WordPress. We'll again like now try to create a new block. Okay. Now, when we look at the list of blocks, we should be able to see the new block that. Let me refresh the page here. Oh, I have to activate the plugin. I've not activated the plugin yet. So this is the plugin that got created. I'm going to activate it now. When we go to the post, so this is the block that we have registered. And as I said, the editor script, editor style, and style. If we go to the source files, we will have three JS files. One is the index.js, edit.js, and save.js. Okay. In the index.js file, we can see that we are calling, similar to like how we did it in the PHP, we also have to do the same thing in JS. We would have a function called register block type. And in the register block type function, what we are actually going to do is register the block, right? I'm going to just collapse all the commands so that we can see how it is. Right? So for the register block type function, we would be passing the name of the block. In this case, it is Cta block. And we will be like passing a title, description, and other things. And you can see that we are using the icon, the smiley icon, and it will be under widgets. Okay. And we have two functions which are passed to this block. One is the edit function and the other one is the save function. Okay. And these are actually imported from the edit and save.js files. Okay. So like instead of creating them as separate files, you could just have a function here, or we could even like create it as a separate file and then include them. So inside the edit.js file, we'll see that this is basically the function that is getting used there. Okay, here we are just returning a paragraph element and then says Cta block inside the editor, and this is the save function. So the save function is the one, or whatever content that is actually returned by the save function, that is the one that will be rendered in the front end. Okay, and the content that is that is returned in the edit function, that is the one that is displayed inside the editor. Okay, now let's see the block, if that block is available or not. So under widgets, now we can see our Cta block here. So we click this, we get the content. So whatever content that we have returned here, right? The Cta block that you can see here. And if we update this, like update this post and see it in the front end, we can see that the content that we have returned from the save function. Okay, but as of now, like this is just like sorry, we cannot edit anything here, right? Because this is just a paragraph that's available. Now, what we're going to do is, because for a CTA, right, we need a text and a link, right, to display a CTA button. Now, what we're going to do is basically edit this block so that we could add two text fields, one to add a text and the other ones to the link, and then change that and then render in the front end as a button. Okay, let's do that. And before we move on, I want to show a couple of quick things. So this is the editor CSS and then the style CSS. You can see like this is actually returned as an SCSS file, SAS file, which gets compiled into a normal CSS by the build scripts. Okay, so the editor.sas will get compiled into index.css file, and then the style.css will actually get converted into style index.css file, which will actually get sent to the browser. Okay, we could quickly try changing it. Maybe instead of white, we can try red. And as I said, like since I'm running the npm start command, as soon as the code is the code is changed, it will automatically compile. We don't have to do anything. And when we refresh it here, making sure file did we modify this time. I think it's getting cached once the cache is cleared. Okay, so moving on, right? So as I said, like we are going to do two things. One is like we're going to add two text boxes in the editorial interface, so that whenever we add this block, we will actually have two text boxes where we could enter the text and the link that needs to be rendered in the front end. And in the front end, we will actually add a button that will get displayed. Okay. Now, for us to, whenever we are going to be adding these fields to the block, they need to be stored somewhere, right? In Gutenberg, for each block, we have something called attributes. Okay, what these attributes allow you to do is basically store some additional information for the block. Okay, now what we're going to do is basically define attributes. section. This will be passed to the option that we are passing to the register block type function. And we are going to have two attributes. Okay, first one is text, and this is going to be of type string. Okay, next is the message, or sorry, next is the link, and this is going to be of type string. And we could also set a default value. So default, let's say, let me, and here this could be, right, something like this. Okay, and as I said, since we had npa start, it's actually going to be watching for these files and automatically start building them. And now that we have these attributes, we can start using them in edit and save functions. Okay, so in the edit function, right now we are only getting the class name, but we need to get the attributes. And then there is also another function called set attribute, which I will talk about now. And we would need a text control. So I think this is coming from components, if I'm not wrong. And we can change this paragraph to a div and display the text control. We need to pass some label will be so this underscore underscore function, this is very similar to the underscore underscore function that we have in PHP, which actually allows us to translate strings. Okay, so instead of passing it through this function, I could just pass a string here as well. But if we pass it through this underscore underscore function, then it will be available for translation as well. Okay, and let's first display the text control and see how it gets displayed. It just got the color change that we did previously just got refreshed. Okay, I'm going to remove this block and I'm going to add it again. Okay, looks like there is some problem. What did we do wrong here? Attributes, and let's quickly check the syntax to see if we missed anything here. think I quoted it for the first time and then missed it after that. This has to be in quotes. And let's try to compile it again. Yeah, now our block is available. It still has some error because we have not fully implemented the text control, but you can see it appearing here. Let's just remove it, fix the issues, and then get it back again. So we've added the attributes, and in the edit, let's just make sure that the text control, where did I import the text control? Oh yeah, so there is this typo here. Control. Let's just make sure that the text control is coming from components. Is it in component? Yeah. Let's just copy from here and make sure there aren't any typos. Okay, let's refresh it one more time. And add the block. Oh yeah, so now we are able to see the two text boxes that we have added. Let's just add a message. We say set the same name for both of them. Oh yeah, okay. Now this has to be text. These are the two attributes that we've used here, right? Yeah, text and link. So we would be using text and link here. And this text and link. Let's make sure it got compiled. Yeah, and let's refresh it. All right, now when we add the block, yeah, so the default values that we have set in the attributes, that is automatically filled for both the text box and the link. Okay, and we could, like, change this to anything. Click message maybe, and when we update it, it will just get updated. And as I told you before, like when we look at the code editor, right, we can see that the attributes that we have set for the block, they are actually stored here. Okay, it is storing the text value. Okay, for whatever reason the link is not stored. let's quickly check if we have missed anything here. This is the link. Oh yeah, so the link is not getting stored because we didn't modify it. Maybe if we just modify it to, I don't know, WordPress.org, update it, and look at the code editor. We can now see that the text and the link, the two attributes that we have set, are stored as part of the block. Okay. Now let's quickly, but if we go to the front end of the page, it will still show this because in the save method, right, we're still only displaying the paragraph. We are not yet using the values that we have gotten here. Okay. Now inside the save method, let's access the attributes, and we can replace this with a button or maybe an anchor link. This should be the link, and this should be the text. Now let's see if this thing works. Yeah, this thing got compiled, and if we refresh, okay, I think there is some caching that's happening. Let's update this one more time. Let's try. Okay. Let's make sure we didn't miss anything here. Is there anything that we missed? Save attributes. We don't need the class name, but let's just include the class name as well. And everything is compiled. And updating it. Why is it not working? Let's just try a simple text. I have a suspicion that there is some caching that's happening, but yeah, this one got cached. Let's remove this block, clear the cache, and we can add it one more time. Cta message, and this goes to WordPress.org. And let's click this. Did we get, yeah, this is, no. Okay, let's quickly verify what ended up happening. This is the save method, and okay, maybe let's just remove the block, update everything, and disable the plugin, and then activate it again. So this should go off. Let's activate the plugin and refresh this. We have removed the blocks. So refresh this. Add the Cta block. Update it. And make sure the attribute, yeah, so this is the text that we got from the save method. The cache got cleared. Awesome. Now let's this, replace it with the text, the link that we wanted. And make sure this get compiled. And refresh this page. And now add the Cta block. And view the post. And yeah, so we got our Cta message here. So when we click this, it will take us to the link that we have specified. Okay, so the reason why it was not working earlier is because whenever, like if you go to the code editor view, we can see that the return value from the save method is actually stored here. So earlier, what I did was I modified the block, but then didn't refresh the admin. So that is the reason why it was not appearing. But now that we have refreshed it, it started appearing. So similarly, what we can do is basically, if we need to add another attribute, like maybe for the CTA button, we need to pick up the color of the link or something like that. All we need to do is like, declare another attribute, and in the edit interface, which will be displayed inside the editor, all we need to do is just add another control. So WordPress by default provides a lot of controls like text area, drop downs, checkboxes, radio buttons, and other things. So we could use that to build our editorial interface here. And once the editorial interface is built, in the save method, we can write whatever content that we need to actually display to the end user, right? Display in the front end, okay? And all the attributes that are declared here in the edit interface, for example, in this text control, what we did is basically we have a label and then the value. So the value is set, whatever is there in the attribute, that is set as the value for this text control. And whenever the value is changed, right, on change of this particular value, we are calling a function called set attribute and setting the new value. So what this on change function is going to do is whenever a text is changed, that value will be passed to this function. And inside this function, we are calling the set attributes function, which will set the attribute value, right? So it will set text equal to whatever is the value that we have, that the editor has entered in the interface. Okay, and those would be persisted as attributes for the block. And in the save method, we can access those values from the attribute variable, and then we can start using that. So here I'm using the link and the text and then displaying it. Okay, so similarly, like any complex interface that you need to build, you can set those attributes. And here, in addition to string, you can use other attributes like int, or you can even have other things like boolean, int, and other stuff. In case if you need to store an image or something like that, you could store the image ID. So the image ID could be stored as an int and then can be accessed. Like here, there is something called a media controller or media uploader, which will actually allow you to upload an image. And once it is uploaded, you'll have the ID, image ID, and then in using the image ID in the save method, you can retrieve it and display it. Okay, so this is like a very high level introduction to how to create custom blocks. Okay, now I'm actually going to stop and look at the chat again to see if there are any questions. And okay, I'm going to be looking at the chat now. All right. Oh yeah, so Vinod basically said that the name of the text control is wrong. Yeah, that was the problem earlier. So I missed. I missed the typo there. Okay, how to make a block searchable in the editor, right? So whenever you have created the block, the name of the block, right? So that would become searchable in the here. So here when we are searching, right? So if you say CTA, the name of the block will start appearing. Okay, you don't have to do anything special there. Whatever the name that you're just using here, that is actually going to become the the name, that the title that you're passing to the register block type function, that would automatically be searchable. WordPress would automatically do it. We don't have to do anything more for that. Okay. Yeah, so yes, we will also be able to pass in certain keywords. So these keywords are like tags that we can pass in when we are registering the block. And those values will actually also be displayed. Like those can be used for searching searching in the admin interface as well. Okay, so let me quickly check. Yeah, I'm actually going to enable the ability for people to unmute themselves. Yeah, so if you have any questions, you could ask us now and we can talk about it.
So hi, Vinod here. So is there any way like customize the inbuilt Gutenberg block?
Yeah, so yes, that is possible. So the question is like, if there are a lot of built-in blocks that we already have, right? For instance, like the paragraph block, the button block, and other things. In addition to creating new custom blocks, it is also possible for us to extend the core blocks that are available. Okay, so what we can do is like we could actually add some attributes to them. So that is one option that we can do. The second option is like we could override the display function. So that's something. So let's say that you want to add a div or some additional parent to to a particular block, right? Maybe there is a paragraph and you want to change the color of a specific paragraph or something like that.
Yeah,
So
correct.
those things are possible actually. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if we'll have time to cover that, but
Okay.
there are hooks in WordPress in the Gutenberg blocks, and we can override that and can add our own custom attributes and can also override the save method. So that's possible.
Okay, thank you. And try to make it session part 2, something like that, for hooks kind of things.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
think this was supposed to be like a very basic session, like just a very small introduction to using custom blocks. But as you said, like there are a lot of things that we can do, like things like, as you said, modifying the existing core blocks. I think WordPress 5.5 also introduced something called block patterns. So we could create our own block patterns which can be reused. Like you could group certain blocks together and then reuse them at multiple places. There are like a lot of such functionalities that are available in Gutenberg. And in WordPress 5.6, which is going to be released soon, there is also going to be a ability for people to have full page editing. So right now, only the content that is visible is editable, but in WordPress 5.6, like the entire page itself would be editable. So that is something that that's going to come.
And one more thing is like, what is the best Java to test that blocks? Like for
Okay.
PHP or PHP unit test. So for this, what is the best
So
tools or something like?
So there aren't good unit testing tools, I would say, for blocks as of now. But there is something called Block Book or something like that, which I've recently come across. Maybe I'll share the link in Twitter.
Yeah,
What
sure.
that actually allows you to do is basically, once you have defined these blocks in your WordPress install, you could just use that library, and then it will automatically create instances. Let's say, like if we have, in this case, we just had 2 attributes, right? Maybe have more attributes.
Yeah.
What that library will do is like it will automatically create static HTML with all the blocks.
Okay.
And it will also show you different combinations in which that block can be used.
Okay. Nice.
Let's say like there are 2 text boxes, 2 radio buttons, or maybe drop downs or something like that, right? So it actually allows you to create or easily visualize like how these blocks would be visible. Typically, when we're creating a theme, there is something called a kitchen sink page that people used to do. People used to create, which will have like all combination of the text, so that there'll be one page where you can see all the different text and other things, right? So similarly, this tool actually allows you to do that for blocks. I think it's called Block Story or something like that. I forgot the exact name. I'll share the link in Twitter.
Okay, sure.
That's something that I've recently come across, which was very useful if we are creating custom blocks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Hi, Muthu. This is Shiva.
Hey, hi. Good.
I have some questions. You use a plugin, right, to create a custom block? Why do you edit the plugin?
Okay, so
if you have any update, the plugin will stuck off, right?
No. So basically, the thing is like we could do. I just used WordPress create block to scaffold the plugin. So the idea of doing that is we don't have to set up everything manually. Okay. So instead of scaffolding it, we could just create our own plugin, like do everything customly also. So that's also possible. But the reason why I did this is to make sure that you can quickly get started, right? Otherwise, like just making sure everything gets compiled and available in the editor and other things, that itself would take like lot of time. So that's the reason why
existing plugin that can be affect on new update.
No, this is not the existing plugin. This is something that I created at the beginning of the workshop. So basically I used, maybe I'll quickly share my screen again. So this is the npm package, the create block command. So I used it to create that plugin. and that's a custom plugin that I created. And that is the plugin where we are having all the blocks that we are creating. So it's something that we created. It's not something that is going to come from WordPress. So it's our code, like it's not going to get updated.
Thank you so much. And one more question is, can you share your screen?
Yes, it's sharing now.
Can you come with the WP admin?
Okay.
Can you add a newly created post, custom blog one more time?
Okay.
I have a problem with it on my last project. That's why. Can you add it twice in a same custom blog and twice?
This one?
Can you update the content? Different content. Use the link. Yeah, it's fine over. It's working to you, but I have the problem.
Yeah, so this is very similar to the problem that we were initially facing in the workshop, right? So first time when I refreshed, it was not refreshing. Do you remember, like in the workshop?
Yeah.
So that was because after you added a block here, if you're updating the block script, right? So what I did initially in the workshop, the mistake that I did was I added the block here, and after that I was making the code change here. So this, the generated JavaScript and other things have changed. So the block has changed, but I have not refreshed this page. So that was the reason why initially it was not working for me. I think something like that might be happening for you also. One way for you to debug that is like you can look at the code editor view and see like what are the attributes. Here you can clearly see that the text as the value got updated, right? If this value is not updated, then it won't work. And this was the problem that we initially faced in the workshop also.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thanks, Muthu.
Awesome. I'm going to go over the chat one more time to see if there are any other questions. Okay. Can you share about REST API for blocks in WP 5.5 can be used to pass data from? Yes. So the block that we created today, right, is a very simple block. It's just using the attributes that were created in the admin and then just displaying them, right? But what we can also do is WordPress has a REST API, so through which we can retrieve post, comments, whatever, and then can display them here. One example could be, let's say that you want to create a related post block, okay, and you want to display, let's say, 3 posts. So in the admin, what you can do is you can have like a post picker where the editor can pick up 3 posts, right? And in the save method, when we are rendering the block, same block in the front end, in the save method, what we can do is like we can use REST API to actually go and pick up the block and then pick up the post and then render them in the front end. So that is also possible. I think Vijayan was asking about it. Yeah, so that's possible. And yeah, maybe in a future session, we could I could probably show you some more advanced things that we can do with the blog, including like using post picker or REST API. There is also something called server side rendering. What we are doing right now is just client side rendering, meaning like the front end of the block is actually getting generated in JavaScript itself, right? But it is also possible for us to use PHP to generate the content that should be rendered in the front end. Those are called server-side rendering, and that is also something that's possible. Hey guys, whenever you will be able to create a blog. Yeah, so Satinder Singh has actually shared a link. So that is for validating validating blocks. That's a very useful link. Thanks for sharing that. So you can use that to make sure if there are any validation errors in the plugin. right? One time during the workshop, you could see that when I added the block, it threw an error saying the block HTML is invalid or something like that, right? So if you hit those kind of issues, you could use that link to validate and check the plugin. I mean, check whatever problem that you're facing, and then you can fix
Actually,
it.
guys, this link is for that if we are submitting our plugin to WordPress. So before submission, we can check at this link if our plugin is according to WordPress guidelines or not.
Yeah. So there is also recently with the WordPress 5.5 release, what WordPress.org, the plugin repository, has done is basically now they are going to be having a different category for plugins that have blocks. Okay. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Yes, this is actually cloud-based searching for blocks from directory from the editor.
Yeah. So in the WordPress plugins, right? So they have something called block enabled plugins. Like this is a new category that they have added. Earlier, you would only see featured plugins and like, beta plugins and popular plugins and things like that. But now WordPress is really pushing in blocks. So that is the reason why now they started highlighting plugins that have blocks, right? So if you're creating or if you're submitting a plugin that has a block, then it would actually get featured prominently in the WordPress.org plugin page as well. You could see like, it's even getting highlighted before Jetpack or other plugins like the feature plugins or the popular plugins. Okay, maybe.
Actually, guys, 1 second. I want to share one of my experience. Actually, there are two types of category. One is block-based plugins, and others are block-only plugins. Means if we have a plugin that has blocks and also other settings, that is block-enabled plugin. But if we are only making a plugin for WordPress editor only, means which we can include only from the Gutenberg editor, then it is block-based plugin, and we can directly search from it. I think from the Gutenberg editor, you can check, you can type any keyword at here, and you can directly install a plugin. Can you please share your screen?
Yep. You should be able to see my screen again.
And open the admin section, Gutenberg editor, add new post. Like search any plugin, add anything at here. Like event, add event at here.
I think there was something called CTA bar that appeared here. Okay.
Yes.
Event. Yeah.
So you can check that it is cloud-based search, and you can directly add a block from there. Now click on add block. So no need to install a plugin from the plugins add new section. You can directly install a plugin at here and directly include in your Gutenberg editor from there.
Yeah. So if we actually look in the plugins, I think
yes.
it would have gotten, yeah. So this theme has gotten, this plugin has gotten installed. So yeah, I think like all of this comes to show that WordPress is actually like, really pushing for blocks. So there are like a lot of these integrations that have happened, and like, if in case if you are a plugin developer and want to like, probably highlight your plugin, like, adding a Gutenberg block would actually be very beneficial these days, because now then your plugin would be like, searchable directly from the admin, and then people would actually be able to find your plugins.
Yes, actually these are different plugins, block only plugins, and they should have two less PHP code, just JS dependent only.
Yeah.
Only
so there are
those plugin will be searchable from there.
Yeah, so there are some restrictions. You might also have to probably read about the guidelines for the WordPress plugin repository. But as he said, like, if your plugin satisfies all those guidelines, then your plugin would be highlighted here. And as I said earlier, like with WordPress 5.6, when the full page editing is going to be available, this is going to become much more popular, because even like plugins which actually allow you to change the entire layout of the page, not just the post content, those things can also be done using Gutenberg blocks. So when that happens, I think it would be.
But I think in today's Elementor is totally grabbing over the Gutenberg blocks and Gutenberg editor, because Elementor have everything. There's nothing to be do inside the Gutenberg.
Yeah, so I think that's something that we have to wait and see. There are obviously like a lot of other page builders, right? I think there was also one question in the chat about how Gutenberg compares with the page builders. There are obviously like a lot of page builders like Divi, Elementor, WP, I think Beaver Builder, a lot of page builders like that. I think it's something that we have to wait and see, but at least from WordPress core, I feel like they are really pushing for Gutenberg.
Yes.
Anyways, so any other questions people have or any suggestions, feedback? Yeah, tell me. Somebody was saying something.
Hi, Singh. I'm Siva.
Yes.
I have a question with Singh. That's why.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Heads up. Like, I mean, if it's something which is related to the workshop, we can do, because like we already have like, you know, overtime by about 10-15 minutes now. If it's something that
yes, I think it's late, also late for others, so we don't go from there.
Yeah, sorry Shiva, like maybe it's something that we could take offline, but if it's something which is related to the workshop, let's do it right away.
Okay.
All right, guys. Any other questions, feedback, comments, suggestions? All right. Okay, so Vijay just had a question: how to add property controls for blocks, something like image blocks. Yeah, so I think I'll just quickly talk about that. So when maybe I should share my screen. Okay, so whenever we add specific blocks, right? Maybe let me just add a paragraph or something like that. So there are some, I mean, like in the right tab, right? So it's also possible for us to add, like, you know, these are called properties for the blocks. These are not technically attributes, but like properties. For example, we could set what should be the size, what should be the font, and things like that, right? For the paragraph. In our custom block, it's also possible for us to create these things. This is called inspector control. And what we need to do is, like, in the edit.js, right? Here, where we are creating this interface, in addition to text control, there is also something called inspector controls. I think inspector panels and controls and things like that. So we could include them from the components, and then we should be able to use them here. And when we use them, we would actually get these, like how we are getting for the core block, right? On the sidebar, we'll actually be able to get those properties which we can change. So yeah, that's also something that's possible. And maybe like eventually at some point in time, we could do like another workshop where we could cover some of the other advanced topics, and maybe this is something we should be able to cover there. All right. I don't see any other new questions here. Anyway, so thanks everyone for joining. This session is recorded, so you should be able to see it at a later point. We will upload it to YouTube, and we'll be sharing the link in Twitter. And as I said, thanks everyone for joining. Really interesting questions, and see you all next week.
Thank you so much, Sudar.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.